Okay, now I want to discuss the game between Grunfeld, who played white, and Schenkein, who played black, played in Vienna in 1915. The opening is a Queen's Gambit declined, AECO code D30, even though it looks like a semi-Slav. So white opened the game with D4, then black played D5, C4, so the Queen's Gambit, and then black plays C6, basically the usual beginnings of the Slav and semi-Slav. The idea is if black captures the pawn on D5, black can just recapture with the C pawn, and by moving the C pawn, the bishop here is still free to move, where in the normal Queen's Gambit decline, black plays E6, and this bishop here is shut in. So black plays C6, white plays a knight F3, supporting E4, hitting E5, and developing a piece on the king side, preparing the castle. Black plays E6. This move, and now black does shut in the bishop on C8. The bishop on F8 is now free to develop, and it also leaves some options open for black. Now black can play C5, or even pawn takes C4. White plays E3, locking in its bishop for the meantime on C1 and freeing the bishop on F1. Black plays knight F6, developing the knight, adding some support to D5. And now I think if we actually if white played on its fifth move, knight to C3, we'd actually have a semi-Slav, if I'm not mistaken. But this opening is a Queen's Gambit decline. But here, white on its fifth move plays bishop to D3. As I've said in many lectures, it's sort of hitting this diagonal and this pawn. It also going to help support the probably an eventual push, potentially V4. Black plays knight on B to D7. The idea behind this move is also to support either C5 or E5, though probably E5 would be played, that way the bishop could be freed. And now white plays knight on B to D2. The idea behind this is that if black plays D takes C4, white can just recapture with the knight, and then the knight can head over to E5. But now black on its sixth move plays bishop to E7, a bit passive. I say better is to play the bishop to D6, where it could help support the pawn push to E5. White castles, increasing king safety and getting the rook into play. Now black plays queen to C7, probably with the idea of supporting the pawn push to C5, and also potentially supporting the pawn push to E5. So once again, the queen is developed, and still unknown which pawn black is going to push. And now white does play E4. This move is probably reminiscent of the Kali system E4, where now the bishop is the diagonal for this bishop is opened, and the pawn is probably going to be exchanged off, and this knight here in D2 is going to spring into action. And black is going to be compelled to take this pawn because it can't allow white to push this pawn, forcing the knight on f6 to move, because this knight here is the best, or one of the best defenders to the king's side, and black is planning the castle on the king's side, and it doesn't want to move that knight because it will leave its king without its best, or one of the best defenders. So black is practically compelled to take this pawn, and then white recaptures with a knight. So now the knight springs into action, and the bishop on c1 is definitely freed. Before, it almost looked like, with the pawn on c3 and the bishop on d2, that white's game looked a little cramped, but it isn't. And now black's going to go about exchanging a piece, hopefully to free up its position. If you look at black's position, it looks a little sort of stuck, so some exchanges usually helps that. So black will exchange off the knight. White has to recapture, and then on black's 10th move, he'll play knight to f6, attacking the bishop. Now the bishop is forced to move, or well, I guess a piece could come to defend the bishop. But white's going to choose to move the bishop, and it's going to move its bishop back to c2, where it can still look along this diagonal, but also potentially move along over to the queen side, where it can sort of shift gears and attack on the queen side too. So now black will play b6, with the idea of playing bishop to b7 and then c5, and that way the bishop can look along this diagonal to the king. Now white plays on its 12th move queen to e2, and the idea here for white is this move will help support the move knight to e5. White also plans to use the king's rook to come over to d1, where it will support the pawn. Because it knows that black's plan is to play the bishop here, and then probably play the rook here. And it doesn't want its queen on the same file as the rook, because that way this pawn here would be potentially pinned. So queen to e2, black plays bishop to b7, and now white continues with its plan, knight d5. This knight is now well posted. Just look at all the nice squares it attacks in black's side. Even helps support that pawn there on its own side. But that knight there is a thing of beauty. That's right where you'd want your knight posted. And now black plays well, actually it could continue with its, or it is going to continue with its move rook to d8, but it can't play c5 yet, one of its goals, because of this move, bishop to a4 check. This move here would effectively force black to move the king, because if black tried to play like the knight to here or the bishop to here, white would just take it with this knight here. The problem being it would win the piece, because the only piece to recapture would be the queen, and then white could just capture the queen with the bishop. And that way, whether black's going to lose a piece or it's going to get exchange a piece for a queen, which would not be ideal. So black cannot play c5 yet, so plays rook to d8, attacking the pawn. And now white will play rook to d1, supporting the pawn, and black will castle. Now can play c5. And this is a good point to stop this video, and I can continue this game on the next video.